Hello, my name is Madeline Schmoll and I'm your host for tonight. Welcome to our Roaring 20s virtual tasting. As we look forward to 2022, we want to revisit the roaring good times with the 1920s inspired virtual tasting exclusively for our European members. Tonight, we have members joining us from France, Germany, Italy, Sweden, Austria, Benelux, Poland, Greece, Spain, Portugal, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and Finland. After being apart for so long, the special tasting is a thank you for all of your support over the last year, and to bring us all together online to share some spectacular drams, all of which are over 20 years old. This evening, we'll sample each of the 5 drams with our hosts, along with ambassadors from Germany, France, Austria, Sweden, and Benelux. We'll also have the one and only whiskey bard Robin Lang joining us live in between each dram for a wee song. If you're tuning in after the live tasting, welcome. Please let us know which drams are your favourite. We'll also happily answer any questions after the fact, so please drop them in the comments and we can take it from there. Let's take a look at the running order for tonight. We'll start off with cask number 38.31, The Magic Is So Strong, followed by cask number 95.39, Indian Summer in a Japanese Garden. Next up, it's cask number 35.295, Mythical and Magical, followed by cask number 46.118, Deep Armchair Satisfaction. And the final drama of the night is cask number 4.284, Orcadian Nights. So this is the point to make sure you have your drams and your tasting mat ready. Tonight marks the first time that we've had 3 of our society panel chairpersons in a tasting, so please feel free to ask questions as we go. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to your ambassadors for tonight. First up, he's a society panel chair and ambassador. He's conducted circa 1,500 society tastings from 1993 onwards and enjoys rum, sherry, and cricket. It's the one and only Olaf Meyer.
Good evening, everyone, and I hope you had a good Christmas and are ready for tonight, because I think we're going to have some cracking drams which we're going through. And it's almost, Madeline, when you read out all the names, the countries or something, I almost felt like sort of cabaret, I love to sing and I love to dance, in cabaret, very much the 20s as well, the roaring 20s in Berlin. And but my daughter always says that I rather hear you drink whiskey than sing, so I'm not going to sing. But it's sort of willkommen, bienvenue, welcome, fremder, étranger, stranger, glücklich zu sehen, je suis enchanté, lucky to see you, bleibe reste stay. And I hope you're going to stay. And if you are a stranger at the moment, I'm sure you're going to be a friend and family by the end of the evening. Most of us, when I'm looking through here for all the list, I'm a German national, so therefore English is not my first language. And Madeline was asking, give some questions to come through. Don't be shy, because it's also not my first language. And I've got a wonderful poem here from my English teacher many, many decades ago, because the English language is very hard. And she penned that poem, and I'm just going to read that out to you just to feel a little bit more relaxed about this English language. The awful English language. Why is English so hard? We'll begin with box, and the plural is boxes. But the plural of ox should be oxen, not oxes. Then one fowl is a goose, but 2 are called geese. Yet the plural of moose should never be meese. You may find a lone mouse or a whole lot of mice, but the plural of house is houses, not heis. If the plural of man is always called men, why should the plural of pan be called pen? The cow in the plural may be cows or kine, but the plural of vows is vows, not wine. And I speak of a foot, and you show me your feet, but I give you a boot, would a bear be called beat? If one is a tooth and a whole set of teeth, why shouldn't the plural of booth be called beef? If the singular is this and the plural is these, why shouldn't the plural of kiss be nicknamed keys? Then 1 may be that and 3 may be those, yet the plural of hat would never be hose. We speak of brother and also of brethren, but though we say mother, we never say mederen. The masculine pronouncers are he, his, and him, but imagine the feminine, she, shis, and shim. So our English, I think you will all agree, is the trickiest language you ever did see.
Well said. English can be tricky at times. I always puzzled over daughter and laughter. and why it wasn't dafter.
Yep.
But there you have it.
There you have it.
And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce you to your other ambassador for the evening. He's known as a whiskey consultant, writer, actor, columnist, curator, master of the Quaich, panel chair, MBE most recently, and lifetime member of the SMWS. It is the one and only Mr. Charlie McLean.
Well, good evening, all of you, and it's so nice to be talking to you, and I'm so looking forward to this session. Olaf, I cannot match your poem. I love it, and the English language is impossible. We find the German language. Well, my son speaks German, and he finds it easier than English. But no, it was a lovely poem. By way of introduction, I was appointed the first official chair of the nosing panel for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society in 1992. I beat you by a year, Olaf. you were one of the very early ones, as was Robin. And you might say that Robin Lang is a fourth chair of the nosing panel, and we've worked together for many years. And seeing the fortunes of the society develop and expand and become, more and more successful. I mean, we were asked. I have made an attempt to dress in a 1920s way. You clearly haven't, Olaf.
Thank you, Charlie.
Madeleine, you have. You're looking absolutely great. You're looking like a flapper.
Thank you.
And but it doesn't matter. Hey, we're here to enjoy whiskey. But anyway, welcome to you all, and I'm looking forward to this evening.
Great. Well, I think with that in mind, why don't we start with the first dram? And joining us from Austria, we have Hannah Unterbugenberger.
Hi, good evening. Guten Abend aus Österreich.
Guten Abend, Hannah.
It's going a wee bit dark there.
So if
Hannah,
I would be
can
now,
you hear us?
You're a bit blurry for me, Madeleine.
Well, Olaf, I think you were about to say something.
No, I was supposed to say, like in the song contest, Austria, can we have your vote, please? Sort of.
Yes.
Vienna calling.
Yes, and here she is.
Good.
Here I am. Okay.
Should we get started?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're starting with the 38.31, sweet, fruity, and mellow in our flavor profiles. It's a 26-year-old, and it's a closed distillery. I can give you that much. It's been knocked down, so it's well and truly closed. And that was 24 years in selected hogsheads, and then this one was moved into a bourbon barrel. So 2 years in a bourbon barrel, 53.9%. And we called it The Magic Is So Strong. And it's magic, not just because of the nose, but also history in a glass. Because of a distillery, you will never see again new spirit coming out. And beautiful color. And I've seen Hannah and Charlie already nosing it, and Charlie already took a sip. Sort of always the quickest. Nothing's changed, Charlie, in the panel. You were always the
one. To give you a clue about Distillery 38, it was originally called Glen Grant No. 2, and it was built just across the road in Rothes on Speyside from Glen Grant No. 1 in, was it 1898, Olaf? Something like that.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it was connected by a pipe between the two distilleries. And this distillery was designed to make exactly the same spirit as Glen Grant No. 1.
Yeah.
It failed to. Because one of the wonderful things about whiskey is that that it's really, even today, it's not possible. Nobody has absolutely been able to replicate the spirit from one distillery even next door, as in this case. And there was a connecting pipe. I think they mixed the two makes for the demand for Glen Grant was such that they had a pipe and it connected the two distilleries. And the good people of Rothes quickly found a way of making a little hole in the pipe and stealing some of the spirit on its way. And so it closed. Well, there was a great downturn in the whiskey industry in 1900, and this Glenrothes number 2 closed, and then it reopened in about 1962. Olaf, would you say
65, Charlie?
65, and was given a different name. And this is the one we're looking at now. I'm very interested that in your notes you describe it as reminding you of Nelson's Dockyard, because of course I was in Antigua. Was it when my boys rode the Atlantic and they finished up in Antigua? And so I know Nelson's Dockyard, and I also know Shirley Heights. I don't know the reference to Clarence House. I don't know that, but the
Charlie, that's just up on the hill. That's just up on the hill when you go up and you see down to Nelson's Dockyard, because it's my tasting note. Because whenever there's rum in it's me.
It's a very vivid note. It's a very vivid tasting note. I'm not sure I'd entirely agree with it, Olaf.
Of course.
But if you let your imagination, so much of what we do in the society when we're designing the tasting notes and getting the thoughts from the panels. I mean, this is not the work of one person. This is a panel, and and as chairs of the panels, we collect all the descriptors from the other people sitting around the table, and ask the rest of the panel. Well, you've got here blood orange and honey sorbet. Well, so that you would have asked the panel, anybody getting blood orange and that? And then the panel would nudge and say it would nod sagely, and then it would down it would go the as a descriptor. So they're not random. They're not fantasy. The tasting notes. It's a lovely whiskey. It's a
Hannah, what are you thinking?
It's really lovely. Yes, sweet. That's for sure.
That's the rummy note for me. That sweet note, sort of. And I said, I said as well, to give me credit, I said, yes, we have gone local, but not in Acapulco, sort of in terms of. Quite sweet. Yeah, I'll get that.
And it's got that distillery character. It's got that sweet Speyside character. But it's not dominated. It's obviously a refill cask. Well, you've fiddled around with it a bit. You said,
yes, we did.
But second fill, you see, that's good.
No, that was the first one. That was the first one, Charlie. It was 24 years in a second fill bourbon, and then in a fresh barrel, in a fresh American oak barrel.
Yeah. Well, that's had an influence, but it hasn't dominated the style of the spirit. Yeah. So I think it's very important to try and get the balance between the what's called the distillery character, the original character, the inherent character of the spirit, and balance it up and round it out, obviously, with through maturation. But you don't necessarily, of course, you can find some gorgeous whiskies which are very heavily influenced by the casks, but it's not necessarily a good idea, in my view.
Hannah, would you add water to this one, or would you drink it neat?
Well, I usually like my whiskies without water.
Oh, there we go.
I think I might stick to my usual way of drinking whiskey. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I prefer a drop of water, I must say.
So it's me, because I've got this wonderful noggin from the society. This old-fashioned noggin.
I've got my wee pipette.
And actually, because I've tried the whiskey beforehand, because obviously you have to try it. But I've got this pipette, which I hate with a passion, this pipette, because it's so chemical experiment. But I have to tell you, these 5 whiskies, they only need a drop of water, so the pipette comes in handy. Sometimes it does come in handy.
We're getting quite a mix of comments from everyone on whether they've added wood or not. Ioannis says little wood, and with water it opens very nicely. But we're getting things like apple blossoms, and I believe I also just saw orange blossoms come up there.
That's what I would have said. not apple blossom, but maybe Olaf Apfelstrudel,
Yep.
perhaps.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Wolfgang Hess, you're not going to be my friend if he says a perfect match to the surroundings here in Andalusia. I don't like you, Wolfgang.
Love it.
So, Hannah, what's going on in Austria? What's the society in Austria up to?
Well, for now, my parents are on a week Christmas break. That's the reason why I'm here today. But we are already planning the new year. We've got a few tastings lined up, and my parents will actually have an appointment tomorrow for another whiskey dinner we will hold here in Carinthia.
Mhm.
And yeah, so far it's been good. I think we've tried to do as much as we could, but unfortunately with Corona still very present.
Yeah, we're not mentioning this word today, so we just ignore it.
we've had to take a step back a few times, but that's okay.
Yeah, and you had you guys had a big celebration this year as well. I saw.
Yes, we had. Yeah, our anniversary tasting, which we postponed due to. But was still very nice. We had Ellen Wood, Robin Lang, and Michael Binder with us, which I think was a good experience for our members, and it was a fun and very entertaining session. So.
You see, and we do like our matching, with something with whiskey, with food. Someone's saying, "Oh, I'm afraid to add water." I literally add a teardrop of water, and I think it's opening it up a bit more for me. I actually enjoy it more with a drop of water. But I'm also going to have a Mozartkugel with it, being Austrian. So that came. That's very
nice.
famous.
Very nice packaging.
So yes, that's my son brought that actually over because he lives in Munich now, and he came over for Christmas. He just made it. He's now back in Munich today, but has now 14 days to isolate. Thanks for that. So that's a long time, but he brought that over. So what I'm just going to unwrap one of those Mozartkugel and gonna enjoy it with my 38.31.
Enjoy. Yes, we'll also have another Burns tasting coming up in January, so I'm pretty sure that will be a great experience as well.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Us as well.
I was going to ask Olaf what he thought of his Mozartkugel, but he's actually chewing, so I'm going to wait until he finishes so as to not interrupt him. But Matthias is saying he's getting roast apple as well, which Hannah, you mentioned Apfelstrudel, which I think is
beautiful, absolutely beautiful,
amazing. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me and having me.
Sláinte.
Sláinte war.
Viele Grüße.
Grüße an alle Mitglieder in Österreich.
Fab. And Olaf, I was going to introduce Robin, but then you very kindly reminded me that you had something that you wanted to share before, which relates to potentially what Robin's going to sing.
Yeah. Because you can see maybe behind you, maybe you can't see it, but this is all sort of Robin's various CDs. And that's just a whiskey collection, never mind his other ones, which are fabulous. But he's also written some books, and one is The Whiskey River he's written. And when we go to the next whiskey, and Charlie, you stole his thunder as well a little bit, because he's going to exactly sing a song about this pipe going over in the Ruffus. So that's going to come up. But even more important for the next whiskey we're going to taste, the second whiskey, he's writing in this book, about 12 years ago, I clutched a bottle of this whiskey under my arm when I went a-courting. It turned out to be a perfect courting whiskey, smooth, sophisticated, easy drinking, and Moorish, without distracting too much attention from the task at hand. And we are now married. So I'm looking forward to the second whiskey, but now over to Robin, who, as Charlie says, we know each other so many it's a decades now as well. Very much looking forward of hearing you sing again, Robin. Lovely to have you.
Thank you, Olaf, and hello, Charlie and Mads.
Great.
Nice to see you all in your little boxes there. Well, first of all, let me say something about the water or no water controversy. Normally, with a cask strength whiskey, I would try it first and then try it with a bit of water. But you know something? I'm not in the slightest bit tempted to add any water to this. Yeah. This is my kind of whiskey. It's an old Speyside, and it's got that lovely nose that seems to swing back and forward between slightly exotic fruits and paint and glue on the other hand, which doesn't sound great, but I love it. And then when you taste it, it's got that syrupy sweetness. It's just fantastic. Now, what I wanted to add to what Charlie said already about this distillery, Glen Grant number 2, let's call it. The reason they had to build Glen Grant number 2 is because Glen Grant number 1, Glen Grant, had been so successful that they couldn't keep up with the demand. And the reason why they had outstripped the competitors at that time in the late 1800s is because they had this idea to market themselves as something special, because they had purifiers on the stills, which they still do to this day. And that just gives a bit of reflux, of course. But they said, we have purifiers. Nobody else has purifiers. And this purifies the whiskey and makes sure that you don't get a sore head the next day. Now, that's fantastic marketing. No wonder they sold so much whiskey. It wasn't true, of course, but that doesn't actually matter very much. So they built Glen Grant number 2. And I'm sure it must be in the Guinness Book of Records someplace, but it was only operating for 4 years, I believe 4 years, before it was closed down and mothballed. So that could be a record in itself. And then it was mothballed, from 1902 to 1965, 63 years in mothball, absolutely kept it ready to make spirit, but it wasn't used for 63 years. That must be a record as well. And when they did reopen it, they changed the name, of course. And I won't tell you what the name is, but it's Gaelic. It's Gaelic for the secret well, which I like.
And Robin, as we all are Gaelic speakers, no problem, is it? I mean,
well, we'll probably understand Gaelic after 5 whiskies, that's for sure. So, as Charlie said, this distillery was famous because the customs and excise, for some obscure, arcane reason, insisted that they should take the new spirit from the one across the road back to the original, where it would be mixed together. And this became known as the whiskey pipe. Of course, whiskey never ran through it. It was new make spirit, but that's perfectly acceptable to the young lads of Rothes. And of course, they would go out in a dark, moonless night with their drills and make a hole. They'd climb on each other's shoulders and have a bucket or something, and they'd make a hole and get what they needed for the night or the weekend. And then they would come back a few nights later, never be able to find the hole again, which they'd stopped up with wax, by the way, to make sure that nobody would know that they were pilfering the whiskey. And it wasn't just the young lads of Rothes. The word got round, and people from all over the area, from Elgin and Fogwat and everywhere, they were all coming and drilling holes to get the new make spirit from this pipe. And it did remain a secret well, if you like, for a couple of years. But then there was a very unusual thing happened, and there was a hot summer in Scotland, and the sun melted the wax that had stopped the holes, and the new make spirit was raining across the main street of Rothes. And I'm sure that's the reason why they closed the distillery for 63 years. So I wrote a song about the whiskey pipe, and it's got a chorus, which is the chorus is a quotation, actually, from a chap called Baiwe Makalaga, who was brought back from Matabele land by Major Grant of Glen Grant. He brought this young black boy back from Matabele land who had been orphaned, and he was rescued, if you like, by Major Grant and brought back. And he stayed with the company and with the family indeed, and worked as a page boy and then as a butler for the family for years and years and years. Even played as goalkeeper for the local football team. But it must have been a bit unusual back in those days, in the middle of last century. He was the only black person in Rothes. And he was apparently a bit of a character. And when I was talking to Richard Forsyth, whose company is very close to where this distillery stood, the coppersmiths, he said, oh yeah, Baiwe Makalaga was a character. He used to say things that people remember to this day. And he gave me an example. And apparently Baiwe used to say, loons is loons the world round, but Rothes loons is buggers. So I don't know that that was exactly the accent that he had, but that seemed to me to be a perfect chorus to this song about the whiskey pipe. Loons is loons the world round, but Rothes loons is buggers. The whiskey pipe got drilled one night in the hail tune. Gathered round, the pipe got drilled, the pots got filled, and they all got foo together. Foo means drunk, by the way, it's not like the French foo. Well, similar. Now Major Grant was a decent soul, the toon folk loved him well. So why they did this terrible thing, not one of them could tell. But whiskey flowing through a pipe suspended in midair was just a touch temptation more than some of them could bear. Loons is loons the world round, but Rothes loons is buggers. The whiskey pipe got drilled one night in the hail tune. Gathered round, the pipe got drilled and the pots got filled and they all got foo together. Now some men dream o' a bottle of drams and some men dream o' a still, but what could please a body more than an auger and a drill? For you'd never need today any work and neither buy nor sell, just enjoy the trickle and flow of your very own secret well. Loons is loons the world round, but Rothes loons is buggers. The whiskey pipe got drilled one night, the hail tune gathered round. The pipe got drilled and the pots got filled and they all got foo together. Now the Rothes loons upset the Lord with their wicked sinful deeds, and retribution come to them all in the form o' aching heats. So they made a contract with the Lord to leave the pipe on Sunday, for a double dose the night before would see them through till Monday. Loons is loons the world round, but Rothes loons is buggers. The whiskey pipe got drilled one night, the hail tune gathered round. The pipe got drilled and the pots got filled and they all got foo, roaring foo. The air was blue, what a hullabaloo. Big galoots as pissed as newts, sucking it out to dirty cloots, and they all got foo together. Yes. Thank you for the roaring 20s applause.
Wonderful, Robin. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Right.
Cheers.
Should we move on to Robin's courting dram? Not quite the one, because obviously he was a 12-year-old, and that's a 38-year-old. Charlie,
Yes.
over to you.
Yes, but before you get started, Charlie, I'm going to bring in our next guest from France, and it's Jean-Philippe
great.
Lardy.
Hi,
Hey.
thank you.
Hello.
Hello. As you can see, with my light decorum, I am isolated because of I am sick with COVID-19 for the second time, despite the fact that I received my third shot. So if I have a kindly message to address is to go to be vaccinated, because I can tell you that you are less injured when vaccinated than not. Thank you very much to the society, to Chloe Scott and Andrew Park for their trust, because this is in France, as you have noted, that boxes have been concepted and built and shipped to Europe. That was a a long trip because, of course, it took time for the whiskies to mature, and we received the bottles from our hub in Berlin. And when we received the bottles in France, we shipped them to Cognac to be rebottled in 2 centiliter samples. And as you noticed on the box, we mentioned not Scotch whiskey, but whiskey, because of course we rebottled the single malt outside of Scotland, so we were not allowed to write Scotch whiskey. Very, very pleased to have produced this close to 800 box, and most of them arrived on time. I'm sorry for the 10 members, mostly in Sweden and Germany, that did not already receive their box, but with their respective country managers, we are working to solve the situation. And of course, there will be the replay to enjoy the tasting box.
Indeed. And those boxes are beautiful. I've seen them. They're absolutely stunning. I've been seeing the photos come through on social media. Well done. They're beautiful.
Thank you. Made by hand in Europe.
Yes.
With love. So I was supposed to share my tasting of this marvelous bottle, but I think it will be more appropriate to let Olaf lead the tasting.
Right, Charlie, over to you.
Well, Jean-Philippe, first of all, well done, and in particular, well done for turning up tonight when you've got the dread COVID. Although I understand that my son got it on Christmas Eve, by the way, and all my engagements for the next, well, not today, but yesterday, Boxing Day, tomorrow, and Hogmanay, all cancelled because it's endemic. Although it seems not to be terribly debilitating, unlike the previous mutations of the virus. But anyway, well done, because it must have been a hell of an effort for you. Anyway, moving on to this whiskey. Where is it? Also Speyside whiskey. I don't know how much I can give away about this. This is a relatively modern distillery. It was commissioned in, I think I've got my book here, in 1972, and it was built by IDV, in the Independent Distillers and Vintners, the owners of Justery and Brooks, and it was built principally as a filling whiskey for J&B Rare, which of course at that time was well, and still remains pretty, well, at that time it was hugely popular, particularly in America. Well, actually, I'll tell you a story if I'm not breaking confidences. The J&B did particularly well early on in the late 1960s, early 70s in the Italian market, and they were very clever because they employed a guy whose name I can't remember, but if I could, I wouldn't give it away. Who was formerly a drug dealer to Roman society, top level. We're talking, of course, the era of La Dolce Vita, where a lot of the society, people in high society in Italy, particularly in Rome and Milano as well, but they were doing a lot of drugs. And anyway, this chap was busted, and but he went down for about a year, but he never gave away the names of his customers. And when he came out of prison, he simply sent a card to them saying, by this time he got the agency for Justery and Brooks, and And he sent a card to them all and said, I have deducted your account to the tune of 2 cases of J&B Rare. And within one swoop, he had J&B Rare in all the top drawing rooms in Rome. And then it spread from Rome, obviously, to Milan and to around the other great cities in Italy. So anyway, this particular whiskey was designed to be a filling for J&B. Mild, like the company also owned Glen Spey distillery, and it was similarly light. So it's a light style of Speyside. When I noticed this just shortly a moment ago, baked apples were mentioned in connection with the last one. I was getting a lot of baked apples on this one. I noticed that the Society's notes was mushrooms. I'm not getting that savory. There is perhaps a very slight savory note. Mushrooms, truffles, fruits and nuts. Yeah. I can imagine it, but and I think that another thing I would say particularly about the Society's notes, but about any tasting note, that these are mere guides. The panel. So it's not, as I say, it's not one person only. It's a panel who have told one of us, the panel chairs, their thoughts, and if the panel is in agreement, then it goes down into tasting notes, and then we dressed up with if we can, with a little story and so on. That's why they're so exotic. But these are not just words plucked out of the ether. Somebody has. Here we are. We've got Doc Muck, a bit earthy. Also, I agree. So that's your mushroom truffle.
Yeah, the first thing, Charlie, which struck me was the wonderful deep color. I mean, sort of being a refill sherry butt, and it's been in there for 38 years.
Gosh, yes.
I mean, it's just
the lighting here is not that good, but
it's just such a beautiful color. I mean, sort of almost an autumn color, sort of auburn, sort of
yes,
totally agree.
and a very, very, as you say, fine light spirit as well. Given obviously we don't know if it's an American oak or European oak in that case.
I would guess American, Olaf.
Yeah, I would think so as well.
I'm getting some vanilla.
But would you think there were American oak already 38 years ago? American oak sherry casks. Yes, there were. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 1982. It's interesting enough because that the American oak ex-bourbon only started to come into the Scotch whisky system in 1946. Prior to that, much of it was the most prized casks were so-called ex-sherry sherry transport casks.
Yep.
But actually, most of the transport casks until sometime in the 1960s, and it varied from bodega to bodega, went over to European oak casks.
Yep.
And so it's something of a misnomer when we describe sherry casks, because it's really the wood that's more important. Are they ex-sherry European oak or ex-sherry American oak?
Correct.
And I think this will be I think this is.
I would think it's American oak as well. American. I would think so. Yeah. No, that one reminds me, because it's the oldest one we're having, 38 years, and it reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen that film, Local Hero.
Yeah, yes, indeed, of course.
Which obviously now is a musical as well, and a beautiful film, 1983. If you haven't seen it, all around Europe, you have to watch it. If you love whiskey, if you love Scotland, if you love whiskey, if you love Scotland. And one part of that film, I mean, there's so many good lines, but there's a very good whiskey line in that film. So McIntyre, he's this American, actually was Hungarian, but they moved to America, and they thought McIntyre sounded more British than his Hungarian name. So Mr. McIntyre came to Scotland, and he wants to buy some land for oil refinery and all that. And McIntyre says, give me a 42-year-old whiskey Roddy. And Roddy, who is the barman, says, "We've got none of these tonight." Then McIntyre says, "Well, give me 4 8-year-olds and a 10-year-old." And then Roddy says, "Aye, that all adds up." I mean, sort of.
I'd forgotten that, Olaf. That's great.
Yeah, stunning line. So as I say, I mean, sort of, it reminds me of these sort of really old whiskies. And I mean, age is not everything, as we all know, but when age, maturity comes together, it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant.
We're getting some really good tasting notes coming in as well from all of the members.
Exactly.
So almonds, Spekulatius, Lebkuchen. I saw Rosinen or raisins there as well. So lots of Christmas things. And actually, Michael has just said, like a walk on a Christmas market, fruits, Lebkuchen, almonds.
Yeah, Michael, unfortunately, we have to imagine it because we haven't had it for the last 2 years, did we? I mean, sort of, but you're absolutely right. And I've chosen, I don't know, Jean-Philippe, if you would agree, but I've chosen a nice French brie with that. French brie. And I've got some oatcakes as well. Typical Scottish. Oatcakes and cheese, I mean, a meal for a king as far as I'm concerned. But I can also offer you a bit of French bread. So I'll just take a bit of French bread. For today, fresh. And just have a bit of brie.
The last comment, perhaps, it's not an old and dignified. This is a very old and very dignified.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
I have to say it's as good an example of the make as I've ever tasted. It's a it is a very lightweight spirit, but this has gained. It's taken its maturation beautifully, and it's filled it out. It's retained it's not dominated by flavors coming from the wood, but it's retained its distillery character. It was one of the very first, if not the very first. The first release was. I think I've closed my book, but in about 82.
86 it was, Charlie.
86, the Singleton.
Singleton, yeah.
Yeah. And it was called, because the name of the distillery is unpronounceable.
Correct.
They called it the Singleton. And it won prizes galore. And it was without stating it on the label, it was a finished whiskey in the sense that it had been the whiskey had been matured out. Did it have an age statement, Olaf? Do you know, was it 12 years old or?
I can't remember. I think it was 12. I might be wrong,
so it probably
that would have been Robin's dram, because Robin's dram was a 12-year-old. So I think it was a 12-year-old Singleton in those days.
I think it probably was, and it probably spent the last year or maybe 2 years in an ex-sherry cask,
right.
Having been matured in refill ex-bourbon or refill American oak. And it didn't state so much, and so there's a big debate. But I think that yes, I'm sure that David Stewart was probably the originator with Balvenie of the finished casks, but I can't remember his name now. The master blender for J&B. Anyway, yeah. It's a lovely dram. It
didn't last long, that Singleton. Sort of finished 15 years later. It was gone.
All sorts of prizes. Yeah.
Well, santé, and truly santé. I mean, sort of wish you all the very best.
Santé.
And, yeah.
À votre santé.
Yeah.
Merci.
And Jean-Philippe, was there anything that you wanted to say to our French members who might be watching before we leave you?
Yeah, for January, we are going to make a focus on rum. This is Rummy January in France. And
Can I come?
Yeah, you can come. You are more than welcome. So we have selected 6 + 1/7 rum in the same box that you received for this tasting tonight. And unfortunately, we can only produce 100 boxes. So it's going to take place virtually 4 times during each Monday in January in France.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Excellent.
putting my name
Merci
forward.
d'avoir
I'm putting
participé ce soir.
I'm
Sorry,
putting
Olaf?
my name forward for the tastings then, the virtual tastings.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much,
So,
Jean-Philippe.
all the
and
best. All the best.
Cheers. And with that, I think it's a good time for another song from Robin before we move on to the next dram.
Okay, happy to oblige. Thanks, Olaf, for reminding me that this was the whiskey that I went courting with all these years ago, and for reminding us all of the seductive properties of a good single malt. I should have done a love song, but no, because we've got nearly all the whiskies tonight are from Speyside, and we've had a couple of mentions of the Whiskey River, the book, which I had to do so much research for, that it made me very happy to go around all these distilleries, visiting and tasting and samples and so on. And I got carried away and I decided to write a song to see how many of the Speyside distilleries I could get into the song. And of course, as you know, there are more than 50 distilleries in Speyside. So this could be a record as well. It's also a very difficult song to remember the words to, but I'll give it a bash. It's called the Speyside Whiskey Song. By Ben Romach and Balminach and Ben Riach I will go, for the Whiskey River's calling me away. By Tormore and Tamnavulin, by Altmore and Tomintoul, for a spiritual sprockle by the Spey. By Macallan and Glendullen and Glenallachie we'll go, distilleries unfolding by the score. By Kininvie and Craigellachie, Mortlach and Dorthrusk, Bittyvich and Milton Duff and Manachmore. There's a wee dram waiting at the end of every mile, frae Dufftown all the way to Dallas Dhu, and a wee sensation that'll surely make you smile at Knockandoll, Caperdonich and Cardew. From Glenrothes to Glentockers, from Glenfarclas to Glenspey, from Glenmurray to Glenelgin and Glengrant, from Glenfiddich to Glenlossie, from Glenlivet to Glenkeith, I'm a whiskey sipping Speyside sycophant. There's Breval and there's Benrinnes, Linkwood and Cragganmore, then there's Speyburn and Strathyla and Strathmill. There's Inchgower, Aberlour, Longmorn and Tamdhu, and the only problem's picking up the bill. And the Spey runs sweetly from the mountains to the sea, through scenery so stunning and sublime. And there's angels everywhere, soaking up their share, aye, and that's okay, as long as I get mine. For the heat or for the body, taken neat or in a toddy, as a medicine it can't be surpassed. If you're fighting a falurgy, you can gargle with Glenburgie. If you're feeling rather blue, then try a double O Dalhune. If you're miserable and fluish, a drappy O Dramouche. And for any kind of pain, scoop a shot o' Alta Bane. And Balvenie is Viagra in a glass. The seductive power of whiskey.
Thank you, Robin. That was wonderful.
Robin, but I still don't know the words.
Well, we'll see Robin very shortly for the next song. But next up, I'd like to introduce Florian Burkhardt, who's joining us from Germany.
Hello, welcome.
Guten Abend, Florian.
Guten Abend, Florian.
Cheers. I've already poured the next whiskey. I hope that's okay.
Charlie, you're not in the minority. We can all speak German. You know, you have to get your son out.
Well, don't carry on. I'll summon my son. He can translate for me.
I'm afraid we could speak German, but
carry
I have to say, of course, that I'm very glad to drink this whiskey with you, and I'm always trying to find connection. And I thought for the last 30 minutes while you tried the other whiskeys, what does connect me with that whiskey? And actually, it's two things. First of all, it's one thing that connects me with the society in a very different way, because I'm very happy to taste this dram, especially with you, Olaf, because when I was born, you joined the society.
Gosh.
1993, you just mentioned it. And the second thing that connects me, I'm actually a brewer by day job, and we're drinking a distillery that was a former brewery. It was called the West Brewery for 50 years.
Correct.
And then it turned a distillery. So what better to have with a brewmaster than a former brewery whiskey?
Yep, that's true. That's true. Florian, yeah. And I'll just want to give one warning to everybody out there, because we know we're under us. There's only a few people listening in, so there's nothing there. Because I once worked in that distillery. I stood in the way for 1 week in that distillery because Graham Cool invited me, the then distillery manager. And I just want to warn you, because I was there from the 12th until the 19th of February 2012, mashing, distilling, doing the cuts and everything. So if you ever see anything coming out of that week, be aware. Be aware. I mean, I give you one tip as well. God, that's now 10 years ago almost, in February. It was a peaty whiskey as well, because when I arrived there first time, I was sort of smelling it. I was thinking, I'm not in Speyside. It must be on Isla. I've got lost or something, because that was the peat week. They did 2 weeks in peaty whiskies, and that was one of those 2 weeks. And when I arrived as well, Graham Cool said to me, well, Olaf, glad you're here now, and I put you into the shift from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. I hope that's okay. So my heart was dropping, but no, he said, no, I'm only joking. So I did the afternoon shift, which was a very, very pleasurable shift, and enjoyed it very much and learned an awful lot during that week. And I believe we got some Swiss members as well with us. I know the Swiss unfortunately can't get the whiskey, but I've been doing 10 years Switzerland tasting. So I told a few guys that I'm on. Not that I'm on, because Robin, they favor Robin anyway. So Robin and Charlie is on as well. And because that whiskey here, which we're trying here now, the 35-295, that will remind you very much of the 35-107, because that was the 20 years anniversary for the Swiss whiskey, for the Swiss SMWS. It was also 1994, was then 2014. So that was 20 years. And it's one of those first fill toasted oak hogshead, which actually in those days, still under Glenmorangie, it was called those designer hogshead. They called those casks designer hogshead, where where a special whiskey from Glenmorangie came out as well afterwards, the Artisan, and then something else which I can't remember. Charlie, can you remember? There was the Artisan.
Oh,
I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was a half-liter bottle, and then it became a big bottle as well, sort of a 700 ml. But that was those casks which were experimented with, and the title was What Else in those days, because I can tell you, because Charlie was talking about how does notes come about and everything. And that was one of those where I sort of sat there with the Swiss Society deciding that's the whiskey. And they were asking me, now, what's the most exported thing from Switzerland in the world? And I was thinking, well, I annoyed them with Google Gloves, of course, because they're from Germany, but that's another matter. So I annoyed them with that. But then I thought, well, I mean, obviously, maybe cheese, maybe watches, maybe whatever. No, nothing. And then it came out, coffee.
Oh. Really?
Yep.
Really?
And then I said, without knowing, I just said, because we spoke in English, I said, what else? Not knowing that was the punchline of George Clooney's Nespresso. Because that's obviously the Nespresso which comes out. So therefore, so that's the what else. So that's how it became what else at that time. And I am so pleased to see that now, sort of 6 years later, this Speyside whiskey, 24th of November 1994, one of 205 bottles. And as it said, the nose neat was a dream, bold, elegant, and refined. And I've taken a different glass. You know, I'm sort of trying to be in the 20s or something. So I'll took a different glass. Wonderful color as well, which they always had.
I have to admit, you were talking a lot about Christmas spice, the dram before, but this one actually reminds me of Christmas even more. There's a German thing called Spekulatius, like a very hard bakery, but really reminds me of this. The German Spekulatius also maybe, I mean, we're 3 German speakers, gives me the chance to put in a little bit of home by speaking German. Ich möchte mich natürlich ganz herzlich auch bei allen deutschen Mitgliedern bedanken, die mitmachen. Bin erst seit kurzem mit dabei bei der Scotch Malt Whisky Society, aber es ist mir eine umso größere Freude, hier mitmachen zu können. Wir hatten natürlich auch, wie viele oder alle anderen Länder, ein anstrengendes Jahr mit vielen zeitlichen Verschiebungen, mit vielen Problemen, auch natürlich hier, was das Bekommen guter Flaschen und guter Samples angeht. Aber nichtsdestotrotz, glaube ich, hatten wir auch ein wunderschönes Jahr, was Tastings anging. Also zumindest kann ich jetzt mal für München sprechen. Hinter mir ist ja auch die Bar, in der wir seit kurzem sein dürfen als Gäste, die Menage Bar in München. Und ich hatte auch die Freude, den Sohn von Olaf Meyer jetzt vor kurzem im Tasting begrüßen zu können. Da habe ich mich auch sehr gefreut. Aber noch mehr freue ich mich natürlich aufs nächste Jahr. Und ich kann auch für uns sagen, nicht nur ich, sondern auch die Ambassadore rund um Deutschland haben sich wieder Gedanken gemacht. Es wird wieder tolle Aktionen geben. Und das nächste, was bei mir steigt, ist nicht der Rum, sondern das nächste, was hier in München gemacht werden könnte oder was schon in Planung ist, wird ein Kochabend sein, zusammen mit Scotch Malt Whisky Society Whiskies. Da freue ich mich auch ganz besonders drauf. So back to you guys. I just wanted to put out some little greetings in German.
That's
Florian,
very kind.
as I knew from my son about you being a brewer, lecturer in brewing as well, I thought, what better matching than a lovely Bavarian Dunkel Altbayerisches from Eyinger.
Perfect. That's outside my hometown. Wonderful.
Because that actually came from my son. He brought that over as
Wonderful.
a Christmas present. So I'm cracking it open now. And,
you've always got the right pairing, do you?
I believe there's been some chat as well about Olaf's magical food box and what's going to come out next.
I'm a little afraid if he does this also in rum tastings, because I don't want to taste a long pond thinking about Olaf pulling out an old tire and an old shoe.
Used to do this, and not anymore. Not anymore. So, zum Wohl.
Zum Wohl.
Prost.
Prost.
I must tell you a story about this distillery because the Richard Gordon, he was appointed managing director of the Malt Whisky Society in 93, but prior to that he had worked for Glenmorangie.
Yep.
And he and I went up round about that to reveal Graham Coull's predecessor, Olaf, was Ed Dodson.
Ed Dodson, yep.
Who was a legend. He'd worked in the industry forever, and later was recruited to design what's it called in America? Anyway, a distillery there. Anyway, lovely guy, and this particular make, the cask number 35, distillery number 35. Was really used for fillings. They didn't. If they did bottle any as a single malt, it was never promoted. And so Richard and I went up, and Richard was tasked with telling Ed that the company, the owning company, were going to put some effort in behind, and he was required to choose casks, and they were going to put some money in promoting it as a single malt. And it was the most amazing thing because he just dissolved into tears, and all he could say was, the boys will be so pleased. They'll be so pleased, because as with any distillery, they put such effort into the make that they're required to, the style of the spirit they're required to make. And of course, most of it goes into blends, and so it's never. So they say, well, I work for X distillery, and nobody says, well, where's that? Nobody's heard of it. But of course, when it becomes released as a single malt, so again, we're talking late 80s, you see, where there weren't that many single malts around, and it was so touching that Ed Dodson, this legendary distiller, and was dissolved into tears because he was so proud that his spirit now would become promoted as a single malt whiskey. And this is a brilliant example. Wonderful.
Charlie, this is for me. I see quite a few positive comments here. There is, as far as I know, there are still a few casks with us, but not many. So watch out for this if you want to, because I've got many of those at home because I think they're just delightful. And 1994, November 1994 distilled, and then the first fill toasted oak hogshead. That's the clue, basically. And if you're after that, as I say, I think there are still a few coming, but they're few and far between now because, of course, they've been going now 6-7 years and they're gone. I mean, I don't know if, Charlie, if you know that, if you remember, they had the mountain oak as well, Glenmorangie.
Yes, that's right.
That's those casks.
Gosh, is that right? Yeah. Very rare. Very rare indeed.
Yep.
We're getting some great comments coming through as well. I mean, the comments section really just kind of lit up when everyone started trying this. So we have Jens saying it's like buttered speculatius dipped in rum, which is a great tasting note. Sander says he's getting hints of cough syrup. Sasha says surprisingly spicy, but overwhelming consensus is that it's a cracking dram.
Complex. Yeah. It's a real
and someone pointed out that's the second magical drum today, but hey, we are in a magical time, sort of Christmas, New Year. So hey, why not?
Why not indeed?
Well, it's a distillery, right, that not much people talk about, and I find it quite sad because they do not bottle quite old whiskies themselves. And actually, we very often got old bottlings by the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, which all were great, and I think it's very underestimated.
Yeah.
But it always gives a problem. I mean, I've done a lot of whiskey tastings in my life now, but I always have a problem talking about some distilleries because there's just not as much facts as in others. For example, like talk about Ardbeg, you can talk for hours. Talk about Macallan, it's got a big story, big history. But Glenmorangie or Regality, there's so much Speyside distillery.
He didn't say that. He didn't say
I
that.
never found a history on like Craigellachie or like Glengarry and stuff. And on this distillery, I was very stupid when I prepared a tasting, but it's a fact I really like. There are 3 distilleries related to death.
Yeah.
It's a stupid thing, but I love stupid facts.
Yes, good.
There is the most discussed death in whiskey history, which is actually the death of Ardbeg Shorty. I found out by scanning the internet. There is Glenrothes, which is built next to a cemetery, and there's this place where there was a place just next to it called Gallagher Hill, where it's just my knowledge, what I was told, was the last place in Scotland where executions were carried out. So
correct.
I thought
you can still find they were digging things up, and you could still find skeletons and everything on there. And actually, I'm not getting any commission from Robin, but he's got a CD out as well, Whiskey and Death. I mean, sort of. It's been out for a while, so.
So do you have a song about that? I'm not sure.
We have to ask Robin for that.
I guess because Robin's got a song about everything, if it's whiskey related.
And here's the man himself.
All right, okay. Well, I'm just so wrapped up in this dram. It's definitely one of my favorite. You can see behind me perhaps some of my society collection, and the one that is most frequently found on these shelves, it's the shelf right behind me, is Distillery 35. I have 18 bottles of Distillery 35. Wow. And that doesn't mean that I don't drink them. It just means that I keep buying them. Can't help it.
Yep.
So a song about whiskey and death. I think whiskey and death is even a finer combination than whiskey and French brie, but never mind.
There was an interview with an old Scottish lady. I think she was from Edinburgh, visiting the Cadenhead shop in Edinburgh and buying a bottle of whiskey. And she sat in a wheelchair. And the girl from the German television, she asked what she's doing here, if she drinks a lot of whiskey, and she said, "That's why I'm in the chair." So the humor can change with the consumption of whiskey quite a lot.
She might also have said, "That's why I'm still alive," because of course the whiskey keeps you going.
That's it. A whiskey a day keeps the doctor away.
Oh, Florian, thank you so much for joining us from
Pleasure.
Germany.
Thank you for having me.
And
Gosh, God bless you.
Sláinte.
If you can just find out the exact proper quantity that ought to be drunk each day, you might live forever.
That's it.
I was thinking about the 1920s, of course, being the time of prohibition in America. It was also a time of prohibition in some parts of Scotland. And we had places like Old Pulteney, a distillery that continued to produce even although the town of Wick and the surrounding area was suffering from prohibition. Parts of Orkney also had prohibition, and places near Glasgow it was very localized. But that was the case in America as well before the act that brought prohibition into the whole country. And I've written this song called Jasper Jack D. It's about Jack Daniels, which is, you won't find 18 bottles of Jack Daniels on my shelves. No way. But it did tickle me that this place, this distillery, the biggest, most successful distillery in the USA probably, and it continues to be a place where you can't buy alcohol because it's a dry county. And in fact, that county in Tennessee, Moore County, Lynchburg and so on, was actually dry from 1909, so even before Prohibition. So I wrote a little song about the idea of visiting a distillery where you can't actually buy a drink. It could have been Old Pulteney. I took a little trip to Lynchburg, Moore County, Tennessee. I wanted to visit the spiritual home of good old Jasper Jack D. When I got to Lynchburg, I couldn't get a drop to try. The man in the place laughed in my face. Sorry, Lynchburg's dry. Dry as a bone, dry as a stone, dry as fake tears down the telephone. Dry as tumbleweed rolling in the dust, dry as a flame on a flake of rust. There's nowhere as dry as the spiritual home of good old Jasper Jack D. I must have looked kind of bewildered, because the man began to explain. He said, Lynchburg's dry as a Scotchman's purse, no matter how much it rains. You can ask for a drink in Lynchburg, but you're always going to be refused. Since 1909, this town of mine is a place where you can't buy booze. Dry as a well when the oil's gone, dry as toast with no butter on. Dry as a tick in a tiger's coat, dry so dry it sticks in my throat. There's nowhere as dry as the spiritual home of good old Jasper Jack D. Jack Daniel wouldn't like it, it would make him cry. The home of Tennessee sour mash is dry as a shovel full of cigar ash. And the last place you can make a splash is here, 'cause Lynchburg's dry. You can hunt like Davy Crockett, you can lie like Monica's Bill. You can wheedle and plead till your eyeballs bleed, you can't get a quarter Jill. The angels here get plenty, but poor sinners, we get none. So don't think twice, take my advice and head for Kentucky, son. Dry as your mouth after you're sick, dry as an oven for baking a brick. Dry as a gulch where warthogs play, or a sinner's tongue on Judgment Day. There's nowhere as dry as the spiritual home of good old Jasper Jack D. Nowhere as dry as the spiritual home of good old Jasper Jack D. Nowhere as dry as the spiritual home, good old Jasper Jack D. Yeehaw.
Thank you, Robin. That's one of those songs. I remember going on the tour to Jack Daniels and getting lemonade at the end and being somewhat surprised. But there you have it. That's what it is.
Surprised and disappointed. Yeah.
Hey.
Hey, Well, before we move on to the next dram, I just wanted to introduce a special video. So our Benelux team aren't able to join us tonight, but they've recorded a video for our members. So here with that, we have Bob Wenting, Monique Tin Kortenaar, and Chris Lauriers.
Good evening, everybody, from the Benelux team. Just a short recording for you to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a very, very good 2022 from us. I'm sharing this dram tonight with you, new acquaintance, to drink on all the new acquaintances I'm going to meet next year. Slange.
Ik wil jullie hele fijne kerstdagen en een heel goed 2022 wensen in gezondheid en goede gezondheid. En hopelijk zien we elkaar weer in het nieuwe jaar. Proost.
Et aussi de ma part, en fait, de la part de toute l'équipe de SNWS Benelux, on vous souhaite un joyeux Noël et les meilleurs vœux pour 2022 aussi. Slange.
Proost allemaal.
Proost.
En tot volgend jaar.
Proost.
Slange. And thank you very much for that, Team Benelux.
Yeah.
Well, on to the penultimate dram of the evening, 46.118, Deep Armchair Satisfaction.
That's a dram for you, Charlie.
Oh no, really? This is a difficult one because there's no story really behind. I mean, this was a filling distillery. It was designed for, and is still used for blending. It's a sort of a core blending whiskey owned by Diageo.
Yeah.
Built again in the 1890s, very uncommon as a single malt, which is very much to the advantage of the society because you really don't see it very often, and it's very rarely proposed. Diageo does the very occasional bottlings in their round malts or whatever casks. No, I haven't seen any in the Casks of Distinction series, but it's a very uncommon whiskey. It's a sort of medium, standardly, it's a medium range Speyside. That's say it's neither light nor heavy, kind of medium. But this expression has much more character than most. Now, Olaf, you can tell us first fill XSTR Oloroso Barrique.
Yeah.
And that seems to have dried it out. 26 years old.
Yeah. 28 years. 26 in a ex-bourbon Hoggy, I assume, and then it's moved for 2 years into a first fill Oloroso Barrique.
Yep.
STR stands for shaved, toasted, recharred, so rejuvenated. Yep. And
yeah,
as you say,
talk us through STR because it used to be just called Richard.
Yeah,
I think it was Jim Swan that came up with the STR
correct.
Shaved.
Yeah,
I can never get it right.
Shaved, toasted, recharred. Shave, toasted, recharred.
It is a bit of a mouthful.
Actually, for ex-wine casks.
Yes.
Well, I think, wasn't it, originally?
Yes. It was wine barrique.
Yeah, that's right. Well, if you're shaving it back, you're going to inhibit any wine characteristics coming from the cask, from the previous fill. But you're also going to rejuvenate the cask by taking it back down to the wood.
Yeah.
And this has been adopted by a number of distilleries now as a way of rejuvenating, because casks are expensive and the refill. But once you've exhausted the refill, once you've let's say, well, it depends how many times you've refilled the cask. But let's say, for example, you've gone to four times refill at 10 times each
time. Yeah.
you know, the cask's knackered, and and so it needs to be rejuvenated or broken up and used for smoking salmon or garden furniture.
I prefer the first.
Is a way to rejuvenate, and it does a very good job. It doesn't bring it right back to the activity of first full cask.
Correct.
But it certainly jigs it up and makes it.
Charlie, I always sort of say it compares to a second fill in a way. That first fill.
I think that's very fair. Yeah,
me.
I agree. Yeah.
But it's quite interesting because, sorry, Charlie, no, because Robin was saying purifiers as well, because this one has purifiers as well, this distillery. So it's quite interesting.
Isn't it, actually? Really? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's got purifiers. So again, it gives you actually quite a light flavored new spirit, which is quite interesting. I mean, sort of in terms of, and it mainly gone into Hague and Dimple. I mean, that's the
absolutely. That's right.
Yeah.
Key filling for Hague and Hague Dimple. Yeah.
This wonderful slogan, don't be vague, ask for Hague. I love that one. I love that one.
Best-selling blended Scotch, certainly in the home market, in the UK market, from 1923 well into the 1960s, you know.
Yeah.
And the don't be vague, ask for Hague. You're absolutely right. It was a winner.
And we've had oh, sorry,
really,
Charlie. Pardon me. I was just going to say we've had a question about the tasting note, and I thought that might be quite a good point to bring in the person who actually wrote the tasting note for this bottling, because it happens to be Robin Lang, who's with us tonight.
Aha! The fourth. I told you he was the fourth chairman of the nosing panel, and he's the most poetic writer of all of us. He is a master.
Yeah.
But as Charlie said earlier, it's very much a joint exercise. It's a panel, and the chair has, historically anyway, two jobs. One is to keep the panel under control, because believe me, after 7 or 8 whiskies, you occasionally get a panel member who doesn't spit the whiskey out every time, and you have to keep them under control because they get a bit loquacious. Anyway, the other thing is to take what people say and somehow distill that into a tasting note. And you have a lot of power as the chair and the person who writes the notes, because you can completely ignore things that some people say, or you can really bring it to the fore. So what I do often, if somebody like Mads, for example, is on my tasting team and she says something really poetic, I just put it in quotation marks. I can't improve on it. And that's the case in this one. There's a line there with it in quotation marks, like sitting in a Chesterfield with a cigar, eating chocolates out of a mahogany box. So I'm sure that was Mads that said that. But the point is that you do have a lot of power as the person writing the tasting notes. You also have a lot of responsibility. You've got to try and make sure that the note is entertaining on the one hand and fun to read, but it's also got to be reasonably accurate. So you can't just get completely carried away with the poetry of it. You don't have the final say these days. I want to make it quite clear that my suggested title for this whiskey was not Deep Armchair Satisfaction. That's been drawn from the last line. You'll notice the second line says the nose was like sniffing a butt. And that was my suggested title, Sniffing a Butt. But the authorities within head office decided that was a step too far. But I used to get away with things like that, and it's all become very woke, I'm afraid. But,
not anymore, Robin. Not anymore.
It's the world that we live in, I'm afraid.
I'm just mentioning this one, Robbie. Whiskey for breakfast. They can't call it that anymore either.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not.
Perhaps just a balanced breakfast as part of a balanced breakfast.
I always ask people, how do they know when do I have breakfast at what time? You know, that's another matter, but we're not going to go.
All day breakfast. There you have it.
We don't going to do that way.
We have had a really good question, actually, and I'm going to put you both on the spot here, which is, don't you lose a lot of the sherry influence with an STR cask?
Well, before Olaf sprouts wisdom about this, I have a problem. I think a bit like Charlie with this STR thing. I mean, I understand de-char, re-char. You scrape the old char away and you give it another burn. I don't understand why you would shave something and then toast it and char it. To me, you would either toast it or you would char it. Why would you do both? I don't get that.
Well, you see, the Spanish casks traditionally were toasted but not charred. American casks they go through toasting, but then they are charred, heavily charred. Yeah. And now the industry, the Scotch whisky industry, specifies toasting and then charring. And it's supposed to activate different things. They say that of course, there was that legendary story about the black black whisky,
which actually, Charlie, is not that far away from the distillery we're talking about. It's actually in the same compound.
And I mean, the heavy char is supposed to activate certain elements in the wood. I don't fully understand it, Robin, but the toasting is bound to happen before you char, and so you specify the degree of char that you want. It's like the more important, I think, is the and to answer the question about sherry, if you then refresh that cask with sherry, you're going to get not exactly an equivalent of a first fill sherry cask, but you're going to get pretty bloody close to it, Yeah. And of course, the industry, since nowadays the so-called sherried casks are seasoned specifically to the requirements of the individual brands. I mean, Macallan, for example, who vaunt the sherried style, but I think I'm right in saying that they will season in Jerez they'll season casks for about a year, and
year and two,
yeah, but that'd be right. And the Glenfarclas and Beaumont, for example, they specify, I think, 3 years and 4 years. Does that ring a bell?
It does.
So it's entirely what the whiskey who commissions these casks, how much sherry influence, but you only get the sherry influence the first fill. So that's why, this is why it's erroneous to think of just ex-sherry. You only get any sherry influence first fill, but also refreshed the rejuvenated casks. If they're reseasoned, you'll get a degree of the sherry, but it depends again on how long the sherry's been lying in the cask.
Madeleine, Seagoat. I've just taken the Christian name. I'm introducing single malt whiskey to some friends. One of the most discussed point with a huge laughter is, what drugs have the guys consumed at writing these tasting notes? That's an easy answer. Whiskey.
Yes, indeed.
Well, Olaf and Sigurd, I get asked this question frequently, and all I can say is that we do get high. We get high on the fumes of whiskey.
That's it.
On the buzz of conviviality and, of course, the ecstasy of life.
That's it.
Absolutely, Robin.
Absolutely. And my trick of box, it was mentioned so often, so I'll have to have it. Speculatius. Mandel Speculatius.
Olaf's magic box out again.
As the Dutch would call it, Speculatius. Very, very traditional German, Dutch, Belgium sort of food during Christmas time. And of course, I've got one here as well. And that's what I would be having with this deep armchair satisfaction. I would just sit there, have a speculatius, and have a sip of that wonderful, wonderful dram.
Yeah, cracking dram, cracking dram.
Cheers to that. I think it's a good time to move on to Robin's next song, if you're ready, Robin.
Yes, of course. Well, Olaf mentioned whiskey for breakfast. I think I'll probably finish with that one. But in the meantime, because I'm so happy to be sitting here, I mean, it's a shame that it's virtual and not actual, but sitting here with people from all over Europe, lots of different countries, nationalities, languages. But what unites us, of course, is the whiskey. And I'm very proud as a Scotsman to come from a country that still at least makes the best whiskey in the world. I know that that's contentious, and it may be that we will be overtaken by the Japanese or the Irish or the Germans at some point, but up till now anyway, we make the best. I'm proud of that. But what I would say is that I think whiskey has done more for international relations than the United Nations or university exchanges or twinning towns or anything at all. Whiskey is what brings us together. And I've written a song about that, specifically, in this case, about Germany and Scotland, but it could be any country. It's called Building Bridges. There's a line in it: let's build bridges, let's stop building walls. So I dedicated this song to Donald Trump, who doesn't drink at all. Building bridges, joining hands, making links from land to land. Whiskey helps us understand that shibboleths can fall. So come on, friend, fill your glass. Let's toast the future, not the past. Let's build bridges, let's stop building walls. Our countries may be far apart, but the same love lies in our hearts. Love for the alchemy and the art to find the perfect dram. So come on, friend, let's drink to that. To whiskey makers, we'll raise our hats. They are our country's diplomats, and here's the master plan to join our nations in a whiskey clan. Building bridges, joining hands, making links from land to land. Whiskey helps us understand that shibboleths can fall. So come on, friend, fill your glass. Let's toast the future, not the past. Let's build something good to last. Take steps, however small. Let's build bridges, let's stop building walls. And sometimes months and years may pass before our paths once more can cross. When they do, we'll crack a cask and pour some amber gold. And we'll remember times we've met, things we've done and will do yet, and laugh about how slow we get and how fast the years have rolled, and how men and whiskey are somehow better old. Building bridges, joining hands, making links from land to land. Whiskey helps us understand that shibboleths can fall. So come on, friend, fill your glass. Let's toast the future, not the past. Let's build something good to last. Take steps, however small. Let's build bridges, let's stop building walls. Let's build bridges, let's stop building walls. Let's build bridges, let's stop building walls.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you very much.
We're applauding you here, but I am sure there is thunderous applause that you can't hear from the hundreds joining in tonight.
Well, slàinte mhath.
Slàinte.
Cheers.
Slàinte. We're now going to move on to the final dram of the evening, and joining us from Sweden, we have Magnus Fagerström. Hello, Magnus.
Hi, good evening. Hi.
Hello, Magnus.
Hi.
How are
Thank
you
you so
doing?
much for a wonderful evening so far. It's been a blast.
Good.
It's great to have you.
Well, very, very appropriate to have Magnus here because obviously the distillery was found by a Magnus. We've got,
Yeah,
so therefore,
correct.
yeah.
And
And
the Viking, so we have
Exactly.
the Viking theme coming up with the
And
Sweden here. So.
of course, Magnus, I'm an Olaf, so I'm a Viking as well. You know, sort of.
Yeah.
Actually, off the script, I'll tell you a great story. I mean, no Americans are in there; it's all Europeans, so that's fine. Because I once had an American group for a tasting, and apparently they wanted, which was only found out last minute, which was too late, that they wanted a Scottish person to do the tasting. And of course, I'm anything but Scottish. But then I decided, okay, it's too late. So I said, my name is Olaf, and I'm actually an Orcadian, I sort of said. And that's how they speak in Orkney. I hope none of those Americans ever went to Orkney to find out.
Good idea.
What you do, you know, sort of in your daily life. I mean, sort of, hey, but it's a lovely place, Orkney. I mean, sort of, and that's where we're going with this final one, Orcadian Nights. I mean, sort of a great distillery, and I have to mention the good old Alfred Barnard, which has been traveling around Scottish distilleries in the 19th century. And I'll just read out the beginning of this one when he goes to that. Once more resuming our wanderings, we take a train from London to Thurso, a tedious journey occupying a day and a half. I think that's probably going to take more time today than it did then. I mean, sort of with the trains as there are. On reaching Thurso, we hasten to embark on board the mail steamer Sankt Olaf, which leaves Scraps the Pier soon after 7. The passage across the Pentland Firth is one of the roughest and usually most unpleasant in the British Isles. It is the channel which connects the two seas, and it's never smooth. That's what he writes. And a colleague of mine, Stephen Shand, he was with the Society 10 years ago. He did this wonderful painting. I don't know if you can see it, sort of the steamship St. Olaf in the bottle crossing over to Orkney. And he gave me the original. I don't know where it went, somewhere in a publication, but he gave me the original, which is a lovely piece, which is now obviously at a lovely place in my house. But not everyone loves Orkney, because there was a Captain Hamish Blair who was stationed in Scapa Flow Navy Base, and he's written a bloody long poem, and I'm not going to read it all. And I tell you why I said bloody, because he called it the Bloody Orkneys. And he said, the bloody towns are bloody cuss, no bloody trains, no bloody bus, and no one cares for bloody us in bloody Orkney. The bloody roads are bloody bad, the bloody folks are bloody mad, they make the brightest bloody sad in bloody Orkney. All bloody clouds and bloody rains, no bloody curbs, no bloody drains. The council got no bloody brains in bloody Orkney. And then he finishes, so I'm not reading all of it. Best bloody place is bloody bed, with bloody ice on bloody head. You might as well be bloody dead in bloody Orkney. Well, he obviously didn't enjoy Orkney.
Not the best trip then.
Well, he was stationed there, so obviously that might be slightly different. It's a marvelous place. And I always love it when I get there, because when I say my name is Olaf, they never ask me, what's your name? They always just ask me, is it written with an F or with a V? That's the only thing they ask me, Magnus.
Yeah,
because obviously
I'm
Magnus
is quite good F, also when coming to
Scandinavian would be with a V. I mean, sort of in terms of
When you go to the fair and you find the Magnus Lounge and the password for the Wi-Fi is Magnus, and then you feel at home when your name is Magnus. So, it's a great place. I actually found the bottle in my collection, or whatever we want to call it.
Good.
So I did have bought the bottle already,
Right.
not opened yet, but now I can try it tonight together with all of you, and see what I have bought actually. And I have pre-tasted it before I came online here, and I do agree with the taste notes. This is a crisp and clear expression. Nice bourbon hogshead. It says refill in the last 2 years, probably a refill hogshead all the way from the first batch also. Wonderful dram and a wonderful ending to the evening, I think.
Yep. Yep. As you can see on the tasting note, it says at 17 years of age, we combined selected bourbon hogsheads from this distillery. We then returned it into single malt into a variety of different casks. This is one of those casks. So as this one is so basically what we've done is we put them into bourbon casks, sherry casks, wine casks, but this one actually we put back into one of those refill ex-bourbon hoggies. So it's the original cask which it came in the first place.
That's very clear, very typical, I think, for a bourbon expression.
Sweet smoke. Distillery. I don't know what you think, Charlie.
Well, what I'm looking for from this whiskey is a very slight hint of smoke. It's there, but it's not. I don't pick it up as much as your tasting note. But I was looking in my book here. And I'd like to read you this because it was one of the whiskies that was very highly regarded as a single malt, even in the 1880s, rather than just going to blending. And so here's my quote: the Pembroke Castle, which was a steamer, called at Kirkwall on her maiden voyage in September 1883. Sir Donald Curry, the ship's owner, and his guests were entertained by the town's leading councillor, who produced his well-known big bottle of Old Blank whiskey. No sooner had this famous brand, famous in 1883, been tasted, that they one and all agreed they had never met with any whiskey like it before, that what was called Scotch in England was as different, i.e. blended Scotch, as different from this as chalk from cheese. 12 gallons of blank whiskey were taken aboard, and the cruise continued to Copenhagen, where, and I quote, the King of Denmark, the Emperor of Russia, and a very distinguished party were entertained on board. The blank whiskey was procured and pronounced by all the finest they had ever tasted. Isn't that wonderful?
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Gorgeous words.
Well, Charlie, you stole my thunder because it's in that book here.
There
you go. I've had it here.
but Olaf, I tell you what, I don't know if I've got this thing here. No, the one thing I discovered actually in the archive before I'd written this was that the one of the he wouldn't have been a guest on that occasion, but Sir Alexander Walker of Johnny Walker was entertained by the distillery, presumably, gosh, I don't know when, but I mean sometime in the early 20th century, and he wrote a letter which I discovered, and it's now framed.
I've got that one. Yes.
Have you got that one?
I've got that one as well.
Saying that beside, he said that even his own brand, Johnny Walker, was only good for Sassenachs.
For the deluded Sassenachs. For the deluded Sassenachs.
It's long had a high reputation, and indeed, Michael Jackson, the late Michael Jackson, he described this make as the great all-rounder. It is variable, I have to say. When it's good, it's very, very good.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go on to complete the thing and say where it's not so good, it's nasty. It's not nasty. It's never nasty,
No.
but it can be absolutely magnificent.
But Charlie,
The great all
fascinating.
round.
Because I was in my digging, I was getting your quote, which you just quoted. I got the Sassenachs, but I also got the distillery manager Pat Scott in 1976, because he said the following: the distillery does not bottle its own product, but several of its customers make a specialty of it as a single malt. The major proportion is, however, used for blending purposes.
Indeed,
That was in
absolutely.
1976.
And Pat Scott, I know, absolutely. It all went for blending.
Yeah.
And Pat Scott was the father of Colin Scott, who was the long-standing master blender for Chivas Brothers.
Right.
Now retired.
Right. And then, quite funnily enough, 1976 that quote is, and in 1979 it all changed because the first 12-year-old first-year-old.
It was 79 when they first released it. Yeah, that's that I would expect about then. Yeah. It's also recent, you see. The to us old dogs. It's
well,
the arrival of single malt.
Yes.
There we are. Yeah.
The Scotch Whisky question and answer from the Scotch Whisky Association from 1953. That's the first one. Now you could get it in Chinese, French, German, Italian, you name it. This is the original one from 1953.
I've never seen that one, Olaf. But it's almost annual production. I mean, there's questions and answers.
It was. But I don't want to pay too much time, but the foreword for the first edition of that was, this book is intended as a handy reference work for those whose interests bring them in touch with the subject of Scotch whisky. Scotch whisky in itself a straightforward product, and one, it might be thought, which could give no rise to any great problems or misunderstandings. Nevertheless, experience has shown the need for some publications such as this to provide a readily available answer to questions which might constantly arise. And if I can
interesting. That's so interesting. Yeah.
And
I must find a copy of that.
There's a question here. What gives Scotch whisky its characteristic flavor and bouquet? Water is probably the most important single factor in deciding character and flavor. And also very important, the Scottish climate plays a major role in this. I can also tell you, are there any well-known brands of Scotch whisky commonly offered for sale as single whiskies? Single whiskies as single malts? No, they are all blends, i.e. they contain various whiskies, both malt and grain, distilled at different distilleries. Each company has its own individual blending formula. Single whiskies are sometimes sold locally.
That is so interesting, Olaf. That was in 1956, you say?
1953.
1953.
Well, years ago, and they started with marketing BS directly from the start. And it's very important. Yeah, right.
Just if you're worried about drinking too much and sort of whiskey, there's a question as well. What is the medicinal value of whiskey? I can give you the answer.
Yeah,
whiskey is universally recognized for its tonic and restorative qualities. Its efficacy as a preventive and remedy for colds and influenza is generally acknowledged. It is also an admirable stimulant to the appetite. Some recent medical opinion, including the Bethel Hospital, Brooklyn, USA, considered Scotch whisky an important item in treating hardening of the arteries and some other diseases.
Perfect. It's also
it doesn't help drinking whiskey when you have a cold, but it's much more fun to be sick. So maybe.
And just the final one, just if you're worried, because obviously we've got many. Is it possible to tell the difference between one brand of Scotch whisky and another by smell alone? For the drinker who is not a professional blender, the only thing is to go on experimenting until practice makes perfect. So just keep on drinking.
Well,
Yeah.
Good
yeah,
advice.
yeah.
Good advice.
In moderation.
Yeah.
In moderation.
In moderation, yeah, of course.
But of course,
as Mr. Hollins had
the
said in Shakespeare, I mean, sort of,
yeah,
if taken
yeah.
in moderation.
But I mean, blenders never, or very rarely, put the liquid in their mouth. They get all the information they require from the nose.
But
So the
I'll
nose
put this now in my mouth.
for
I'll put this
assessment.
now.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
we've had some comments coming through, but I'm curious, Magnus, what do you kind of get from the dram when you try it?
I do find Charlie didn't say he got the peatiness there, but I do find that the peatiness there is subtle. Yes,
Yes.
Nice sweet aroma from the bourbon cask, and that salty sea influence from that is quite typical. So this one for me could actually be an oily and coastal as well as lightly peated, because it has that. It's not that oily, but it has that coastal feel about it with the saltiness and stones on the beach or whatever you want to call it. I think it was a lovely dram, quite clean.
And I think sometimes you do get that crossover slightly between lightly peated and oily and coastal. You can get that kind of sweet salinity from both. But it is, it's kind of what is the dominant flavor when the panel and whoever's on the panel is coming to assess that sample.
But I mean, the problem is with those flavor profiles, actually probably that's the most argument we have in the panel, because what is lightly peated for one person is peated for another. What is spicy and sweet for one person is spicy and dry for another person. Because obviously we live on this variety, and then to box it back into the flavor profile, it's a hard one. It is a difficult one. And again, I'm never saying we got it right. We try our best to get it right. And I think it's a great guidance for members to look out for. But again, just try it really at the end of the day. And I mean, this is a peated whiskey here. I would have not made that a peated whiskey either. I agree. I would have said lightly peaty or oily and coastal, like you said, Magnus.
But it is lightly peated. This is slightly peated.
It is lightly peated. Yeah. And
But,
for that, Magnus, I've taken some. I've got some Rivita, as we call it, Knäckebrot.
Okay.
Knäckebrot, and then I've got some wonderful herring with it.
Ah, nice.
It's Danish herring. Sorry, I couldn't find Swedish one, but
it's okay.
It says Scandinavian, so I'm hoping it's going to be all right.
Very Christmassy for a Swede. A nice way to finish.
Me being a German, obviously, I love my herring as well, and I love my Knäckebrot. So I'll have a
super. Before we finish off and Mads turns me off, I want to say Happy New Year to all the EU members and especially the Swedish ones. And I will see some of you in a few minutes, because we're going to have a short Zoom meeting for the Swedish members to say Happy New Year to each other and sum up the evening. It has been a great evening and fantastic drams. I know Jean-Philippe has gone off, but if he sees this afterwards, great thank you for all the work doing these fantastic presentations, the boxes, and sending out all these samples to all over Europe. Super great work. And thanks for letting me in tonight.
Thank you so much, Magnus.
God bless you, Magnus, and very happy. We all say in Scotland, Happy New Year when it comes. It's sort of it's superstitious to say Happy New Year before the New Year, but Happy New Year, and indeed Happy New Year to all of you who are listening when it comes. Because another expression in Scotland is, if we're spared, we might be dead before the New Year. So Happy New Year.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
And the final thing is that I would say, as you touched on, or either you or Olaf, the whiskey is the great cleanser. It is the detergent. It kills all known germs, including this beastly COVID bug. And I'm of course we're all vaccinated to bits and so on, but I think that my system is cleansed by drinking lots of whiskey.
Well, thank you
Hey.
very much to Magnus for having joined us, and we've still got a tiny bit of time left for one last song from Robin. If you haven't posted what your favorite dram is yet in the comments, then please do so. And I'm going to be asking that question to Olaf and Charlie when we get back. So have a think and let me know when we get back. But over to you, Robin, for one last tune.
Thank you, Mads. Thank you, everybody. I've not had so much fun between Christmas and New Year since I was 21. Somebody once said that whiskey was the cure for which there is no disease. And it's also, to my mind, a bit like good champagne. It's a kind of drink, this sipping whiskey that we've been enjoying this evening. It's the kind of drink that you can have anytime, any place. Not like rum, Olaf, right? Okay, just want to make that very clear. So this is my song called Whiskey for Breakfast, just to underline the truth of it. I take whiskey for my breakfast to see me through the day. Just one little whiskey helps me on my way. Clears my tubes, thins my blood, clarifies my head. Just one little whiskey, then I go back to bed. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. Now some folk love their cornflakes and others porridge oats, shredded wheat, sugar puffs, whatever floats your boat. If I have to eat grass for breakfast, this is the kind I'll choose. A little bit of barley converted into booze. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. Well, I come from the land of Calvin, the devil, and John Knox. Winter lasts for half a year and we sleep in woolly socks. But if I lived in southern lands and woke up in the sun, I wouldn't need breakfast whiskey. Well, maybe just the one. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. Oh, Claudio Bernasconi lives in San Moritz. He cleans his teeth with whiskey. He very seldom spits. He brushes, he gargles, and swallows it with glee. And then he comes down for breakfast, and he has the same as me. And I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. And when I go to Isla, I party all night long. Fun and drams and stories, even the occasional song. And sometimes I take breakfast before I go to bed. But if there's nothing in the fridge, I have another dram instead. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. And when I go to Dufftown, I stay at the Tannoch Bray, and Alan keeps some whiskey in an aerosol spray. He spreads a mist of whiskey over my beans on toast, and then he squirts some on my tongue, and I like that the most. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking, to stop my knees from quaking, to to stop my bones from aching, to stop my skin from flaking, to stop my heart from breaking. And unless I am mistaken, I'll be dancing like a Jamaican. Oh, whiskey for my breakfast, and I'm limbo dancing all day long. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin.
Robin, you're a
Great, Robin.
genius.
Cheers.
Always a joy to listen to you.
Oh, it's great. Absolutely great.
So, final notes of the evening. Favorite dram? I'm going to ask you first, Charlie.
I've seen some of the things flowing in, and people. And what's so interesting and what is so encouraging is that there's a range. There's none. The range of choices pretty well span all the whiskies that you've offered. I cannot say I'm in a difficult position because I get to see so many thousands of cask samples, not necessarily from the society, but from elsewhere, and it's very difficult for me to say. I'm often asked, what's your favorite malt whiskey, and I say, well, I couldn't possibly say because I see so many samples. Any distillery is capable of producing a dog, and that same distillery is capable of producing a superlative whiskey.
Yeah,
I'm afraid that the I would say the same here. I was the 95 was probably the best example of that whiskey that I've come across. The 35 was a gorgeous, really lovely example of that one. A bit disappointed by cask number 4, the Highland Park. I've never been really terribly impressed by distillery number 46, and I certainly couldn't get all the complexities that the panel discovered. But so I mean, I really simply couldn't say which was my favorite of all these. They were all extraordinarily well chosen by you guys, and and interesting whiskies. Sorry,
I'd say it's an embarrassment of riches, one might say, in
Or
terms of
yes,
trying
exactly.
to pick a favorite.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Olaf the same dreaded question.
Oh, people will know me well. My answer is always the next one coming is my favorite whiskey because it's still coming, so I still got it in my glass to enjoy. But I would like to answer that question by the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, An Honest Tale, which was for the 18th birthday of the society, 1983 till 2001, 18 years. Next year, we're going to celebrate 39 years of the society and wait for the year after for the 40th birthday. God, time just flies when you're having fun. And that Honest Tale was written by Abigail Busanko in August 2001, a lovely, lovely lady. And I'll just read the beginning and the end. Last night in the members' room, I met a charming man, a society member who lives just around the corner from the vaults. We shared a dram 4.73, a beautiful whiskey from Orkney, called As Good As It Gets. As good as it gets. And now I'm coming to the end of that line. Now, the society is 18 years old, legally allowed to drink whiskey. We keep discovering better and better things. Why on earth did we call the 4.73 As Good As It Gets? There's always another good whiskey, the cask waiting for us to find it and bottle it for our members. We should have called the 473 As Good as it has been so far. And therefore, all I'm saying is that this finishes here with carpe diem, i.e., seize the day, just enjoy the moment. And I think I can't say that.
Abigail had a great nose, didn't she? She was a great member of the panel.
Yeah.
Lovely.
And with that, I just want to say thank you for everyone who was here tonight. Thanks for everyone participating. I couldn't be quick enough to read all these things. I'm sure I missed lots and lots, but I thoroughly enjoyed my evening, and it was great to see Charlie again. I don't know when I last met you. It's such
Some
a long
time
time
ago. Yeah.
And Robin as well, singing again. Madeline, I saw you more regular, but no, it's great. It's great, and it's great to have such a great community in the society.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you both, gentlemen, so much, and thank you to everyone who's joined in, whether it's been someone commenting in the comments, our country ambassadors. There's been a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes. We've got Andrew who's been pushing all the buttons and feeding us notes occasionally, so thank you very much to Andrew for all of his hard work, and to our European teams who've also put in a tremendous amount of work, and France, who's delivered the beautiful tasting packs that you have at home. But I think, Olaf, you've said it, carpe diem, and really, to the next dram. So it has been wonderful sharing these drams with you. And as 2021 draws to a close, we wish each and every one of you all the best for 2022. Slán sivar.
Slán sivar.